Welcome to the Ex Terra Podcast. The Ex Terra mission is to explore and discuss the business of space and its effect on the national and global economy, as well as life on Earth. How does what happens in space affect your life every day? That's what we're exploring on the Ex Terra website, as well as on this podcast. My guest is Blair DeWitt, CEO of Lunar Station Corporation, a startup that provides cutting-edge lunar environmental intelligence that is critical for planning and executing missions on the moon. Blair, welcome to the program.
Great, thanks to be here.
Tell us, first of all, what is lunar environmental intelligence?
So there's a lot of information contained in the moon, and those that are going to the moon need to have better access to it. One of the critical pieces is what's going on the moon at any given moment environmentally. Where's the sun position? Where's Earth? What's the soil like? What are we going after? What's the terrain structure like? Those are all the environmentals, and then there's radiation and mineralogy as well.
So how do you know what that is? I mean, very few people have been to the moon.
That is right.
So how do you determine what those factors are?
Yeah, fortunately for us at this point in our history, the moon has been explored for about 60 years. It's been explored in the 50s in the lead up to Apollo and actually putting humans on the surface of the moon. And that exploration has continued even though humans haven't been on the moon since the mid-70s. So all of this data that's getting generated from satellites, other automated landers, gets accumulated and stored. And for us in the US, it's stored in the NASA Planetary Data System. And that means that there's a huge repository of raw data in there that can be pulled into an environment using cutting edge analytics, have better insights. And there's still currently the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that is still generating new data. Now, it's a singular device, so the rate of new data is somewhat constricted, but that's about to change.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to found the company.
Absolutely. So my career sort of bookended with aerospace. While in college, I was going for flight school with the Marine Corps and had an opportunity after college to pursue that further. And then NASA came calling. And so I had this decision to make, and I went and was a software engineer with NASA. At the time, Hubble was already deployed on orbit and needed some repairs. We were focusing on Space Station Freedom. So there was a lot of activity in low Earth orbit at the time. And, working on those projects and understanding how much great information was coming from Hubble through the various wavelengths was really my first exposure to in-space remote sensing. And combining that with what I had learned while with the Marines and training, like how to do ground navigation, and if you're in an aircraft, how are you going to maneuver? It was a great combination as far as setting my North Star. Then the mid-90s, Silicon Valley came calling, and I left government and went into pure high tech. And I spent decades in pure high tech. And it was great. What an exciting time to be there in the dot-com bubble. It was craziness. You couldn't define the market, but the market was being created as these companies continued to put really what we take for granted today is the internet, really sort of organizing it at the time. So it was a fascinating experience to go through. And then as most people experience, you stay on a certain career path for a certain amount of time, and you start looking around like, okay, I got this. What else can I do? And some people call that a midlife crisis. Sometimes a sports car or a new hobby takes care of that. For me, I decided to go back to school. and so in going back to school, I had a particular interest in, okay, what has been happening in space? And to my pure delight was new space. And so really got into it and haven't looked back. And so while on the campus, while I was doing my master's, started looking at the economy of new space and that there were these different economic zones being established. The low Earth orbit, mid-Earth orbit, geostationary orbit. And then there was this lunar emerging. And I said, ooh, that's an interesting emerging market. I'd already kind of gone through that. And so I started exploring more and more about the lunar economic zone that was really very nascent, and all of a sudden started really organizing the entity that is Lunar Station Corporation on campus. And upon graduation, launched the entity, and here we are 6 years later.
I have to ask, when you were in flight training in the Marine Corps, did you have designs on being an astronaut? Were you hoping maybe to one day fly in space?
Actually, even before I figured out I wanted to be a military pilot, I wanted to be an astronaut. So it was always sort of baked in that my path to space was something that was just ingrained in me as a child. And, the opportunities that space holds is greater in aggregate than the opportunities on Earth.
I have a tenuous connection to that Hubble repair mission that you mentioned. Ken Bowersox, who was the commander, I think, on that mission, was 2 years ahead of me in high school.
Is that right?
Yeah, I actually know him.
Oh, that's fantastic.
He probably wouldn't know me from Adam's cat, but
yeah, and Hubble got a bad rap up in the beginning because the one wavelength that didn't work was the one wavelength that taxpayers are really excited about, the visible wavelength. Every other wavelength was working great, and we were processing vast amounts of downlink data. And being on the inside of that, watching how the taxpayers responded to one wavelength being out was unfortunate, but it really got NASA as an organization focused on, okay, we can actually do work in space. It doesn't all have to happen on the ground. Let's go up. And they had a great platform in which to retrieve it, repair it, redeploy it. And I think that's what you're seeing some of the commercial entities in low Earth orbit focusing on, like, okay, we know how to do this, but how do we do this servicing more of a global economy?
Who else is on your team, Blair?
Yeah, so I have Dr. Frederick Genet. I have retired Navy Captain Dennis Williams. And we've got some technical staff in Brownsville, Texas, which is an interesting story in of itself. And then we're advised by what I love to call the new space dream team. We have Mike Griffin, we have Lisa Porter, Kevin O'Connell, Keith Masback, we have Terry Virts, and also Sean Casey. And when you look at those 6 advisors, they represent all aspects of space over many decades of experience, whether they were in government service first and then went commercial, or they were on the commercial side and brought in to government. But there's a healthy balance of government agency sponsored activities in space and commercially funded activities in space.
Now, your flagship project is called MoonHacker, which on your website you describe as a lunar station cloud. What does that mean?
Yeah, so when we started organizing the entity that is Lunar Station Corporation, we naturally went out to the market and started trying to understand what the needs are. What can we do to help the lunar economy accelerate? And right away, what came back was, yeah, there's a lot of data from the moon. We have a lot to build, and there's a critical piece missing in the middle, and it's information, so that we can make decisions on our engineering designs, on how we need to operate our missions. And so when we further explored that, we could see that that gap was actually much wider than our initial surveys of the market. And so what we wanted to do is take the best practices from high tech and bring it into aerospace. And that is to provide a software as a service or a cloud offering for these analytics, because there's a lot of heritage type information systems in aerospace. You've got to get the CDs, you've got to install the software, you've got to do all this work, and you've got a dedicated server, you need people to manage all that. And it's problematic, because if you're building the best next generation lander, do you really have time for that? No. Right? So how do we help lander companies, rover companies, rocket companies, mining companies really focus on what they want to be focused on? And that is to just give them access to a platform that is standing by, ready for them to log into.
And of course, the blockchain guys all say that data is the new currency. And it sounds like you're working on capitalizing on that.
Absolutely. And there is not much difference in how the moon is going to grow as part of our experience as a species, no different than crossing a big ocean and finding a new island. When you think about humans over millennia, there's this reach. And how you reach initially is with a sort of king or queen's blessing. And after that, there's a pause. And then the everyday person starts dreaming and thinking about, oh, well, we went there. What can we do there? Because we need help. We need more space. We need more resources. There's, different things there for us. Well, same thing's going on with the moon. The kings and queens have sent their missions to the moon, and now it's time for commerce to come in. So it basically, the moon becomes our eighth continent, which is fantastic because it's in the neighborhood. It is the place to go in space. Economically, you can survive a trip to the moon. Let's say you forgot your Twinkies and your ham sandwich or your donuts. You'll be okay. On a fast ride, you're back before you're really in trouble. You can't do that with Mars, right? Like,
not yet.
You can't leave anything behind for Mars. So if you can get to the moon as sort of the hub for space, that makes it a very scalable model. And so the lunar economy is really about how does this eighth continent become the actual hub for other places. You catch a quick flight to the moon, and then you catch your big flight to Mars, to the moons of Saturn or Jupiter, wherever you want to go. You can make that a very viable economic model in short time, because the moon has enough resources on it, including water, that you actually can set up shop on the moon and start building things there, having a workforce there, hosting guests who are going on to further our reach in space.
So Blair, what are you learning from the MoonHacker project?
Well, I think the thing I really get excited about learning with the MoonHacker project is the fact that there are so many people interested in the moon. That in itself is fascinating. It's very dynamic. Everyone's looking for something slightly different than the other. And it's fascinating to be in this sort of center of the interest in the moon. And our ability to service those unique finds has been very interesting. It's been insightful. I've learned so much about the moon because of the people that we're helping.
I'm talking with Blair DeWitt, CEO of Lunar Station Corporation on the Ex Terra Podcast. Take a minute right now to click subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, any of the videos from Ex Terra, the Journal of Space Commerce. So Blair, let's talk about some of the use cases now for MoonHacker. How are you seeing it being used now, and kind of project that out a little bit into what you're hoping it will be used for?
Yeah, definitely what we're being used for right now is site identification. Now, as I mentioned previously, everyone's got a different interest in the moon. So one site for one organization wouldn't necessarily be applicable for another organization. So, but they both have this understanding that they know what they're looking for, they just can't find it. So we help them find it and then understand it. And so that has allowed MoonHacker, through its iterations, to have a very solid understanding of the terrain, the topography, the astrodynamics that are necessary for a successful mission. That being, if I'm going to use the sun's power, where is the sun rising? Where is it at midday?
Sure.
When's my last ray of sunlight? Because when the sun goes down, you either try and survive the night without any heating element, which is very challenging, or you then initiate your heating element so that you can wait for the next sunrise, and then you got plenty of power and heat and all that sort of capabilities. So understanding those dynamics, can you see Earth directly so that your communications is really the traditional, I see Earth, I talk to Earth, Earth talks to me, or are you going to have an obstructive view of Earth, therefore you need a relay communications network available to you? So those are also important considerations for a desirable site. Radiation exposure, not just galactic radiation, but radiation that actually reflects off the surface, or albedo based radiation, and that is topography centric. How much reflection are you going to get? Heating. Rock distribution is actually an interesting use case, because there's no rain and wind wearing down these rocks. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that really moves rocks around are either moonquakes, which happen. You know, they're part of the natural movement of the moon around Earth and around the sun. But more importantly are the meteorite strikes that occur on the surface every year. We see them as meteor showers. We kind of go out in the middle of the night and like, oh wow, yeah, that's a great frequency. Well, there's nothing slowing those things down at the moon, so they're actually incoming. And the kinetic energy as a way of displacing the surface. Now, fortunately, given the maturity of our solar system, the meteorites that are impacting the surface are relatively small, but still traveling very, very fast, right? Mm-hmm. Every now and then there's a big enough one, we can see the impact here on Earth with an infrared camera. Yeah. So, there's still some bigger impacts that occur, and so the displacement. But rock distribution is one of those things that you can look at a picture from the 60s, mm-hmm. and it's not going to be the same as a picture you would take today, simply for the fact that we go through these meteor showers every year. They don't stop. Right. And that means that those projectiles are also experiencing the moon as they're experiencing our atmosphere every year. So there is a dynamic nature to the moon's surface, and we're here to help understand that for our clients.
Lunar Station was a contributor to the Department of Energy's report titled Commercial Lunar Propellant Architecture. Is the moon, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but is this a good place for fuel and resources for the space economy?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, the moon is so close to us that it is a great waylay, hub, and because water's there, there's really three things that you can get from that. You can get your propellant, you can get fundamental building material. So you take regolith and you add water, and you almost have like a very pliable, printable material for structures, and of course, life support. So the fact that there's water on the moon makes it a very viable hub for what we want to do there and where we want to go beyond the moon. And the identification of water has been relatively new since 2009, and understanding the dynamics of how the water is created on the moon organically and how it's been placed there just through our solar system's mechanisms of moving water from one place to another via asteroids and comets.
So what is the feasibility of accessing those resources in the medium or long term? And how soon do you anticipate we'll be able to actually go there and get them?
The majority of the lunar economy as it is today is in pursuit of that water. So the probability is very high. The fun fact here is that it's not really going to be a government agency that's going to put a nation's flag on that water. It's going to be a private entity. And it won't be just one private entity, but a cohort of private entities. So you'll see mining concerns, you'll see infrastructure concerns, you'll see power, all working together as a cohort to obtain this valuable resource that's on the moon.
Your company was also a finalist in the Startup Texas Pitch Fest. Talk about that experience a little bit, and would you recommend it for other startups?
Absolutely. It was a great experience. And we were connected into the Brownsville community via our advisors. And I love the history of Brownsville as far as it relates to aviation. And I love the fact that they're also a center for new space. As you know, SpaceX has a significant investment in their R&D operations in Brownsville. And so we had an opportunity to participate in a new space oriented community. And there also happened to be this, hey, let's talk about your company. And they also had a mentoring process as well. So you didn't go in cold turkey. And I find that all these mentoring processes that are around for startups, again, whether you're doing a blockchain startup or a new space startup or a health startup, there are so many places to get help. You're not sort of going it alone. You just have to find those mentors that you connect with and that they connect with you. And Startup Texas was fantastic for that. Just like Catalyst Accelerator,
Sure.
that is in Colorado. So we have these strategic allies in how we can grow. And, we can't think of anything better than those entities.
Has funding been an issue for you as a startup, or is this environment right now good for companies with the right idea, the right product, and a good team?
Well, how long is this podcast?
The lovely thing about the internet is that, I'm not Joe Rogan. We're not going to go 3 hours, but.
Right. So, I think what people need to understand is that there is always funding available. But you have to consider the cost of capital. There are significant costs of capital, but you can get funded. And then there's smart cost of capital, and that'll take a little bit of time and extra effort to make sure you know who is coming in, what does that money represent, what are their expectations as far as how they consider this a win. And then there's a low cost of capital but it means more that it sets a different time frame. So if you're getting VCs, everyone likes to talk about VCs. They're one of many mechanisms in which to get funded, but sometimes it's overlooked are grants, government awards. There's a cost to that, but it's low. Loans, okay. If you are going for a loan, you just have to make sure you can pay it back within the time frame. For VCs, family offices, the larger capital placement mechanisms, there's a broader window there. And so, yes, we're funded. We already knew that we were going to be a C Corp out of Delaware because we needed to have that flexibility to raise funds over time with different audiences. And so right away, we got funded in our angel round. And our ability to have that flexibility and evaluate various costs of capital have been because we started the entity in the right form. And so for any entrepreneur listening, that is a critical phase. Do you want to be a sole proprietorship? Do you want to be an LLC, an LLP, an S Corp, a C? These are really important decisions in the beginning because it has a contributing factor to the cost of your capital. Sorry, I tried to abridge it.
No, I get it. And I know you're a software engineer, not an economist, but are we in the kind of an environment right now, as far as the economy is concerned, that you feel like new space is going to continue to have those kinds of opportunities, or is the money going to dry up?
That's a great question. There are certain parts of new space where the market is getting well-defined. So now you have a strong basis of comparison, and capital is judgy. They will compare you with whatever they have available. And the more a market grows, the more comparables they have, and therefore, but for the founders looking for funding, they have great models to follow to build on. For the moon, it's an emerging market. And so it's hard to find comparables. And it's also hard to know how to model yourself because that market is being defined as I'm talking to you. And it, again, kind of goes back 25 years of my career to the dot-com bubble, and nobody knew what the internet was going to be used for. What could it be used for? And there were the skeptics, there were the visionary yogis, and then the rest of us in between, right? That figured out day in, day out what the internet was going to be initially, and then kept seizing on opportunities to further define it. Now, anyone doing the internet-based startup business, it's well-defined. There's plenty of failures and successes. And so I'm excited to see that the lunar economy is getting more and more defined. PwC did a great job of their latest lunar market assessment. I think they were absolutely accurate in how they broke it down. The estimations of value for the various sectors and submarkets within those sectors. So that's a big mechanism.
I think that's an interesting analogy. I was working at C-SPAN during the mid to late 90s when internet video was first starting to come on. And at that point, to think that we could do this on the internet was unfathomable. And now it's commonplace. And I think that's going to be something that it happens in this new space arena as well.
Exactly. And I think when you look at all the other sectors in the global economy, energy, manufacturing, shipping, there's been these revolutions that have been disrupting, but enhancing. And I think it's now aerospace's turn. And that new space really is a disruption mechanism. It's not a litmus test if you're cool or not. It's, can you come in with a new approach, and how effective is that new approach in advancing the market? And we saw this in the dot-com era. There were heritage computer manufacturers and software makers. And then there was this crazy bunch of people doing new weird things. And that interplay between what had brought the industry to that point and what was going to take it that much further is where aerospace is. There are fantastic heritage organizations in aerospace, great pedigrees, right? Just fantastic. But now there's this whole new slate of new entrants coming in, doing things differently and shaking it up. So you have this really interesting, and I don't like the term old space. I mean, it's not because I have gray hair. I just think heritage is important and heritage is earned. And I think that's an homage to the companies that really have brought the industry to this point. So I like talking about heritage space and new space. I don't like talking about old space because it's not interesting. But where the industry goes from here is really exciting because it's confusing. And that's very good.
Which is a great lead into the last question, and we are just about out of time. But look out, Blair, if you will, the next 10 to 15 years in space commerce and Lunar Station's role in it, and tell us what you see.
Man, amazing question. So I see us having a supply chain that's healthy and vibrant to our eighth continent, and that the eighth continent is able to provide more for us here on Earth and give more opportunities to more people there. And that the supply chain is so vibrant that it expands our ability to obtain Mars, the moons of Saturn, other places in our solar system, and maybe beyond. So that in the next 10 to 15 years actually is reasonable because we're not dealing with a single space agency run by taxpayers. We're talking about a global economic engine. And when that global economic engine gets turned on, it accelerates. And our role in that is to make sure anyone that wants to participate in the lunar economy has the best information possible so that they can make the best decisions, because we want them there. And very early on in late 2015 or early 2016, when we were really organizing, that's what we felt our calling was to help everybody have a great mission to the moon. And our part is to make sure that they have all the information they can want to make the best decisions possible.
Going to have to leave it there. Blair DeWitt is CEO of Lunar Station Corporation. Blair, thanks for being with us on the Ex Terra podcast.
Tom, this was fantastic. Please, I'm looking forward to coming back in a couple of years and telling you more.
Hopefully it'll be before then, Blair. We appreciate that. That is going to do it for this edition of the Ex Terra podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Be sure to click on subscribe so you don't miss an episode of the podcast or any of our other videos. You can also get daily space commerce news at xterrajsc.com. And one thing more, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter at xterrajsc. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for joining us.